Hi, I'm Richard Vague. Liz Truss assumed the office of British Prime Minister in September of 2022. She would only be in office for 49 days. She sought to enact the same kind of tax cut-based economic boom that her idol Margaret Thatcher had enacted. Truss's September 23rd tax cut announcement caused the British pound to plunge 5%, and long-term gilts to plunge along with it. For Thatcher, the currency did not take an initial plunge, and though gilt yields rose, the strategy was viewed as one for containing inflation. So why was Thatcher able to pull it off but not Truss? Number one, Thatcher had a small trade surplus, and Truss had a fairly large 2% trade deficit. We deem such a trade deficit to be one of the most important adverse factors in any economy. Number two, Thatcher's government debt ratio was a mere 39% of GDP. Truss's was a whopping 103%, over twice as much. Third, Thatcher had a budget surplus of almost 1% of GDP, versus Truss's gaping deficit of negative 3.6% of GDP. For Truss, the trade deficit looked only to get worse, with Ukraine war-related energy prices adding downward pressure on the currency and bringing higher import prices, higher inflation, and inevitably, as part of that, higher interest rates. The 103% government debt to GDP ratio meant that her resources to combat higher inflation were constrained and limited. In fairly dramatic and beneficial contrast, Thatcher had plenty of government dry powder to deal with any crisis. She carefully kept her budget surplus intact with lower expenses, plus her trade surplus held through 1985, giving her plenty of breathing room to enact her policies. A fourth crucial difference, not available to Truss, a difference that made Thatcher a legend. Thatcher had low private debt levels. The ratio of private debt to GDP was a tiny 58% when Thatcher took office. It was triple that level, 158%, when Truss took office. For Thatcher, there was plenty of room for substantial private debt growth. I mean, these would be businesses investing to power GDP growth. In Thatcher's 12 years, private debt skyrocketed from 58% that I mentioned to 116%. That lending splurge buoyed GDP growth and good times, though it led to an ugly recession just as she left office, which she left for John Major. Truss had no such private debt dried powder available to supercharge GDP growth with the high numbers she had. So that's the story. P.S. For Thatcherites, note that real UK GDP growth in the 1970s was higher than in the 1980s, 3% versus Thatcher's 2.6%. That's it for now.